Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our MSW panel. My name is Takako Kono, and I'm the Associate Director here at Silver. I work with most of our students. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm here today with 4 MSW students, and they're going to tell us about their experiences in the program and academics and field. This is your chance to ask any question you may have, so feel free to type it in as we go. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to our 4 panelists.
Hi, my name is Wendy Chum. I'm a 2-year student. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And my current field placement is at New York Presbyterian in the Westchester area in the geriatric unit.
Hi, good evening. My name is Casey Scott. I'm an OYR student, which is a 1-year residency program. I'm 3 years. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and my placement is at the Child Center of New York doing clinical and community organization.
Hi, my name is Lee Rice. I'm a 2-year student. Pronouns are she, her, hers. My current placement is at NYU Langone and Brooklyn Hospital in the inpatient psychiatry unit working with adults.
Hi, my name is Morgan Godfrey, and I'm a 2-year student, but I did my first year in Shanghai, China. My pronouns are she, her, they, them, and my current placement is at the Brooklyn Veterans Hospital, where I work with veterans currently suffering from homelessness. Oh, I'm also leaving early. Sorry, I forgot about that. I have class.
Great, thank you. So what was your journey like to NYU Silver, and why did you ultimately choose us?
So when I applied for my MSW, I applied to several schools, and I went to the info sessions, and I think that NYU really just gave me the more flexibility with my schedule and trying to be a full-time student, a full-time worker, and just kind of balancing all of that out.
I would agree. It was in the heart of social work. It was close to home. Just understanding my work schedule as also a full-time worker, and then doing internship, and then having the ability to commute back and forth was a great opportunity for me.
I was actually in the professional field for 3 years before coming to social work school. So I had a bit of a career change, but working, I was working in the educational field, more on the administrative side, and seeing sort of those systemic issues brought me sort of to the field of social work, because I thought getting an MSW would be, something that would, benefit my career professionally. And NYU seemed like a great place to do that. I'm from Manhattan, so it was nice to be close to home.
For me, I have a background in political science and international studies, and I was really interested in a program that allowed me to gain an international perspective for social work. And so NYU's opportunity to do a year in China and a year in New York is really unique, specifically to NYU. No other MSW program that I'm aware of has an opportunity for you to spend an entire year abroad, and that was really critical for me to gain an understanding of how different cultures utilize social work and social work values.
Wonderful. And on that note, all of you are in different programs, which is really great. Why did you choose the program that you did, and how's that experience been?
So I chose the 2-year program because I didn't have a bachelor's in social work. I had a bachelor's in human development, and the 2-year program gave me the room to be in school for a good amount of time to learn the skills that I need, but also not too long a time, because I really just wanted to do it and be done in a way. So.
My program is the OYR program, which allowed me to keep my full-time job to finish NYU, but also give me the opportunity to do an internship in another placement. I had 7 years experience coming in, so I had quite a lot of experience understanding social work, so being in the program allowed me to learn about the techniques and more of the formal aspects of social work and apply it to the work that I was already doing.
Yeah. I was in the same situation as Wendy. I chose the 2-year program. I was working for a few years before coming back to school, so I felt like it was, a good time to return to that student life. So that's why I chose the 2-year program.
Yeah, kind of as aforementioned, in terms of an international perspective, that's what drew me to the Shanghai program. And I definitely think that I learned a lot about international social work, and I think if that's sort of what you're interested in, it's a really unique opportunity to learn about different perspectives.
Wonderful. Now, field work is always a big question that students have. A lot of people say that field is the heart of the curriculum.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about your current placements?
I can start.
Going Charlotte.
And so I'm at New York Presbyterian in the Westchester division in their geriatric unit. I wanted for my second year placement, I wanted something more different than what I'm used to. And a lot of my career has been working with children and adults, and I never had worked with the geriatric community. And it was just a great opportunity for me to not only learn about the clinical aspect of working with that community, but also like the case management aspect of it. And just giving me the full spectrum to have that experience on my resume pretty much.
For me, my placement is actually at my job with OIR. So my full-time job is to be a comprehensive adolescent pregnancy prevention program coordinator. In short, a sexual health educator for high schools. But my placement is focusing on community organization and clinical interaction. So therapy, 101s, girls group, boys group, and really focusing on a program that is student-led and student-run around teen impact prevention programs. So just really emphasizing and creating advocates and citizens for our high school students to be active leaders in the community.
So I'm at in an adult inpatient psych unit at a hospital. I spent the years before social work working a lot with children and families. Always thought I'd wanted to work with children, but then sort of as I went through social work school, that changed over to wanting to work with adults, specifically with severe mental illnesses. And the hospital setting seemed really fitting because it was really, an inpatient psych unit is very fast-paced, which I love, just as sort of my working style. And I do assessments with the patients, the inpatients there, connecting them to resources and helping them leave the hospital safely and working with a treatment team of doctors and nurses.
Yeah, so I'm at the Brooklyn Veterans Hospital where I work with the Hood Bash program, which finds sustainable housing for veterans currently suffering from homelessness. And I was interested in this placement, so I worked with children last year in China, and I had the intention of joining the military after I graduated. I injured myself, so plans have sort of changed a little bit. And I really like working at the VA. It's very comprehensive, so you get the opportunity to learn a lot of different modalities, work with a lot of different types of populations that all have one thing in common, which is being veterans. And the VA hospital really values social work interns as students, and so you're given a lot of learning opportunities and a wide variety of social work sort of nuances.
Wonderful. Now, social work internships are quite unique, and you all mentioned a couple of key phrases that you hear among the student body a lot, things like case management, working on a team of service providers and practitioners. Can you give a little bit more detail about what that means day to day in your internship? For example, what is case management? Is that part of clinical practice? Maybe talk a little bit about that.
I would say case management isn't always a part of the clinical experience in social work, but in my opinion it should be. I think it's really beneficial for patients that we see. At least at the VA, part of being in the Hood Bash program specifically is intensive case management. So our clients are required to undergo case management, which is basically they check in with us, we make sure that they're adhering to everything they need to do for Hood Bash, that they're getting the medical and counseling sides that they need, and sort of a little extra support on their journey to finding sustainable housing. That's how it works, at least at the VA.
Mm-hmm. I think that case management means a little different depending on the environment that you're in. For example, like at the hospital at New York Presbyterian, case management for me means discharge planning. When a patient gets admitted, that the first thing that we start doing is discharge planning to see where they're going to be after. We don't want them to be in the hospital for a necessary amount of time, and we want to be ready for that moment when they're like ready to go home. And then working with the team is kind of collaborating with the doctors and the nurses, and I know that my unit specifically has a lot of medical students. And my role a lot of times is like managing the family part of it. We're connecting the doctors with the family and providing the family that psychoeducation on like what the doctors are saying, because sometimes that's really hard to follow. And even for me, that's been a great experience to kind of learn more about that.
I think in my school, case management is like the individual clients that I see, like the students, and the team is really working with your partnerships, other social work interns, the director, and definitely the school principal, and kind of understanding like each role and the importance of education, but in different aspects, especially having a conversation around social emotional.
Yeah, I think a really good part about working in a team is that you get to be exposed to, different professions. And so, on the inpatient unit, I'm working directly with a psychiatrist every single day that I'm at my field placement, and, seeing how our clinical skills can differ, and, where I can support her, where she supports me in dealing with all of our different cases. So that's been really great to experience.
And we're really lucky to have an OIR student on the panel. So, Casey, I would love for you to talk about how you balance work and school.
Well, first off, self-care is very important. It is a long-term process, but it definitely plays a big role in me being able to manage a 35-hour job, a 28-hour internship, and then the other roles that I have as a student. However, having worked at my agency and having a team who really understand the importance of social work and social work students has really been vital in maintaining and be able to balance between work and school. It is doable. I'm here about to graduate in May, yes. So I definitely want to say that it's doable, but really make time for yourself, set boundaries. There are some things you're going to give up, but you're going to get them right back when you complete your degree.
Great, and I'm going to take this moment just to welcome everyone who's joining us to type in some questions. Feel free to ask. We have 4 great panelists here with a wealth of experience. The next thing I want to talk about is how you've grown since your first placement. It's oftentimes nerve-wracking to start out an internship in New York. What was it like, your first internship? How has your perspective on social work changed since then?
My first internship, I felt like I had taken a break from school, so coming back into being a student, and then that role of you're an intern, so you're at the bottom of the food chain kind of. And I think even though it was a great learning experience in my first internship, I was at a methadone clinic. It was very difficult for me. I never had worked with substance abuse before. That was the first time. My supervisor could have been better. I could have advocated for myself better in that role and what I needed from her during that year, but I think that was the lesson that I took away from it. It's advocating for myself and really taking control of my education, and I think that lesson has really carried me into this internship this year, where my supervisor and I have a great relationship. I am able to communicate with her of like, okay, this is how you do things, but this is how I learn. Can we find like a middle ground in it? And that's been a great experience for me.
I guess for me, OIR is a little different from internships because it's a 3-year program. So the first 2 years, you're part-time, just academics and really working at your agency or wherever you're employed. And then your 3rd year, it's academics, internship, and your work that you do. So it was really good to step out of my professional role as a director and move into more of a social worker and be able to apply the things that I learned in class a little bit more to the population in a different aspect. So for me, it was very exciting, as it is now, to really move into more of a clinical aspect, especially if my work focuses on community organization.
I was coming from more so an education administrative background. When I first started my internship last year, I was working with adults in the South Bronx who were coming, from shelters and sort of like rebuilding their finances, trying to find jobs and connect them with resources in their community. And it was my first time, 1, working with adults, and 2, being that person to support them both emotionally and like in terms of resources. And I was like, well, how do I do social work? And I was, that it really sort of allowed me to be a little bit more intuitive with like my skills, in addition to, having that foundation that I was getting from school. I think that it allowed me to focus on, my interests that were shifting from more like family education towards working with adults. And so I think in my 2nd year internship, that's where I'm really starting to grow, and I really think that I'm starting to find, what the population is that I want to continue working with.
Yeah, I think it's a little different in Shanghai just because internships and field placements for non-Mandarin speakers are there's just a lot less options than if you were here in New York. I was lucky enough to be placed somewhere that I really enjoyed, but I also didn't have great supervision, so very similar to Wendy, I sort of learned how to advocate for myself and sort of how to be a self-starter. I did a lot more program sort of development. I worked with students and was putting on mental health programming, well-being activities for the student while doing very, very small, like one-on-one sort of therapy with students who are stressed. And so I think what's been great about my field placement this year is that I've gotten to have that clinical approach that NYU is like very famous for. And so at the VA, I've had the opportunity to practice a bunch of different modalities of psychotherapy, which has been very exciting.
Thank you. And we have our first question. Thank you, Samantha, for this question. For the two-year students on the panel, do you suggest having a job while also in the two-year program? And if so, what's it like balancing a job and school?
I don't have a job because I'm very lucky that the VA internship is a paid internship. It's one of the only field placements that I know of that comes with a stipend attached to it. And I honestly don't know if personally I'd be able to handle working a job and going to school and doing a placement. So I think it's maybe something you have to feel out when you first get here. I don't think it's something that you can just get a job and do it, or I think it's something you have to take time to figure out.
I definitely agree. I think it's like you really have to ask yourself, is this realistic? I know for me, it probably was not. And I think, maybe assess your first year, are you having challenges balancing, your placement and school, and if you feel like you can create room for it, like by all means, like go for it. But I really do think it's like a personal choice.
I think for me, I really didn't have a choice but to be a full-time student, a full-time worker, and an intern. It's just I just had to do it. But I feel like I was very fortunate in creating boundaries for myself and within my job, and also like just the relationships that I had with my jobs, and explaining like, hey, I'm going back to school, like I still want to be here, how can we make this work? And again, NYU really helped with the flexibility. I go to the Westchester Campus, so I was allowed to do one day of classes compared to maybe coming 2 or 3 times into the city, which that also helped. So I think that if you have to do it, there's a way to do it. But I think like you guys said, it's like if you know yourself better than anybody else, and if you think that you won't be able to take care of yourself in the middle of it, then maybe find something that works.
Yeah, it is totally doable. I know plenty of people in the two-year program that manage to balance all three of it, but it is definitely like a personal thing. It's not just a blanket yes or no.
Yeah.
And on that same note, can you talk about what the process was for getting a field placement?
I have strong feelings about it. For me personally, my second year was terrible in finding a placement. So VA placements fill up extremely fast, and I had communicated with my field instructor that very early on that's what I wanted, and there was just a lot of, I think, differences in the way that this person and I communicate, and so I had a lot of trouble finding a placement until mid-July, which I think is later than when most people who aren't in the Shanghai program find out. So I think it's a little different if you're here in the city because you can go and like advocate for yourself in person, but through the Shanghai program, it took a lot of, again, advocating for myself to get the placement that I wanted, to feel like I was being heard and listened to, but overall ended up with what I wanted. So overall it was positive, but it was a little sticky through there.
I think for me, my first year placement, I worked at a clinical psychiatric program, in-home program in Connecticut, and I wanted to do something completely different. I didn't know exactly what that was, but I talked to my advisor, and she kind of worked around like not only finding something different, but also something that worked with my schedule that was unique and kind of hard to figure out. So that's how I ended up working with substance abuse, which it was very hard, but also very rewarding at the end, because I think I learned that that was a door that I didn't know that I could open as a social worker, or that I wanted to have open as a social worker. So it gave me the opportunity. And for my second year placement, again, I wanted to do something different, because I think being a student is such a unique role to be in and to be an intern at any facility or any program, because you can, you're a student, you get to learn, you get to make mistakes, and it doesn't really fall on you all that often. But you get that room to really figure out, like, hey, is this something that I like, or is this something that I don't like? Like being at the hospital setting really interests me, and I had an idea of what it would be like, but then now being in it, it was completely different from what I thought it would be, and I thought that I didn't like it, but I actually like it a lot. So it's just a learning experience.
Yeah, I remember for the first placement, you fill out a survey. It's sort of very broad. You give your background of what you've done professionally and, in terms of your interests. I was, working with children and families, so I thought I was going to be in a school, ended up being more like a social services type organization. But for my second placement, as I mentioned before, sort of while I was taking classes and everything, my interest started to shift more towards, the mental health field. And so I was really, really advocating for myself to work at a hospital for my second year placement. And my field instructor also kindly advocated for her students as well, which is something that I found really great about NYU's program, is that you have your professors and who are your field instructors advocating for your interests in most of the time. And I felt as though I got very lucky with that, and so that sort of led me to get my placement for second year in a hospital in the inpatient unit.
I think for OIR it's a little different, but I guess the advice I would give is really do the research beforehand, know your agency, really find out if you have a licensed master's social worker or a licensed clinical social worker to kind of oversee your hours, and just see the different departments that you have and kind of go through that process earlier, because the 3 years do creep up on you, especially when your first 2 years are just academics.
Thank you. We have a question from Maria. Is NYU worth the price? What does it offer that other schools may not, and how are you all managing the costs of the program?
So, kind of like I stated earlier, NYU for me is the only program that I know of that allows you to do an entire year abroad, and NYU is also one of the only schools that I know that has a wide array of study abroad opportunities and global learning opportunities, which is what drew me to it. I also didn't know NYU was a private school until after I applied, and that really changes your perspective on how much things cost. Yeah. But I've taken out student loans, and it is very daunting, and like complete honesty, like knowing that I'm going to graduate and be in a lot, like almost triple digits of like debt is really scary. Whether or not it's worth it, I think that again is sort of like a personal thing, like how you felt about your learning process. For me personally, I don't think I would have been able to spend a year in China without NYU, so for me it is worth that price that I paid, and I think that NYU links you to many job opportunities after you graduate, and you can do something where like you pay off your loans if you do 10 years in public service, and so there are options that make the price of NYU less daunting.
I would second that. I feel like it is an individual decision. I feel like I paid every penny for my education in terms of like I studied abroad. I am one person that believes to use the name of NYU and access all the services here. I'm an OIR student, so me saying that means a lot because you're paying for what you get, and then also you want to invest in yourself, and I think that's the question. What are you willing to do to invest in yourself? Debt is a very serious conversation, and it does happen to most of us, and it is very common in master's students, especially when you don't have the opportunity to work. But look at scholarships, look at your agencies, you have Schoolie, you have the Washington Center, like you're paying for NYU's name, so that's also attached to the tuition in itself. But in general, like I'm a clinical student, but I'm also a community organization, and I had plenty of opportunities to see macro work. So I was not only here for just the standard clinical work, but I was exposed for that, and that was part of the tuition because it was part of those opportunities that I would have never gotten in any other school.
Yeah, I agree that NYU like network is huge. Yeah. You know, there's so many different NYU schools just beyond even Silver. There are, tons of campuses that are abroad that you can take advantage of. It extends just so much further than like who we are right here. I also think that, or something I know that I can plug, are like the educational grants that you can apply for that are pretty helpful to a lot of students. There's a bunch of different types depending like on your background and what you're looking for. I know something that I qualified for was I was an AmeriCorps member before I applied to get my MSW, and AmeriCorps gave an educational grant which I was able to use towards continuing my education, which was really great.
I think that kind of like how you guys said, NYU is such a name. Like wherever you say NYU, people will recognize that. And I think for me, at least, when I made the decision to come here and I have gone into other MSW programs, it was just the NYU name. Like I think it carries a lot of weight. And I think for me, what made it possible for me to afford to be here is just the scholarships. I applied to a lot of different scholarships. I was lucky enough to get them. And I think just your ability to really manage your finances, I guess. Like as students, we have, things that we have bills, we have responsibilities, but really just managing, for those 2 years that you're going to be here, what you're willing to kind of work around.
A question from Sabina. What is something you wish you knew at the start of your MSW program?
I wish I would have known how much I was gonna be emotionally taxed throughout the program. Like you think going in, you're like, oh, it's social work, there's some parts that are gonna be emotional, but it is very heavy. You go through complete 180 changes in what you view and what you see, and I think knowing that I was gonna need to take self-care time and taking that idea of self-care very seriously and understanding the emotional weight that a social work program can put on an individual would have been really nice going in. I also came into this program right after doing undergrad, and so I wish I would have known that that's a lot in a process too, and maybe had taken some time for myself, like a year off, to sort of relax a little bit, because I've been in school now since I was in kindergarten, and so I really wish that I would have understood the weight of the program, I think, emotionally.
Maybe, at least for me, it's your interest will change. And that doesn't happen for everyone, but that definitely I know there's a bunch of people who that did happen for, and you might go into social work school thinking, this is what I want to do after, this is why I'm getting my MSW, if that pertains to working with a specific population, maybe with a specific agency, whatever that may be. I went in thinking maybe I was going to work with children and families, and now I'm graduating thinking I want to work with psychiatric inpatients, and that was a complete 180, which happened my first year, but I would have told myself to be a little more open-minded, which I learned throughout my first year of social work school, and that was I'm grateful for that experience.
I think for me it's that I didn't have to remain such much in Silver, that I had other opportunities to visit other graduate schools, that there were other programs in the university that applied to graduate students, especially students of color. So that was very important to me to have those spaces outside of the program, because going back to what was said by one of the my colleagues right here was just that it is emotionally draining. Social work does take a lot out of you, and sometimes it's good to know that you have spaces in a larger community.
I think for me, I wish I had known that even though I'm in one of the regional campuses, I'm not in the main campus, that I'm still part of NYU. And I think sometimes it does, for me, my first year, it did feel like I was in a different, separate school. But I think that at the end of the year and entering this year, I learned that there is just one big thing, and I can be as much as part of this big campus as I am of my own campus.
Briwan wants to know, what part of the city do you live in, and how does that work with your placement? Are they on campus at all?
I don't live on campus. I live in Bed-Stuy, which is a neighborhood in Brooklyn, because my placement was in Brooklyn. And I'd also like to preface, please do your research before you move, because I'm from the South and did not know that Brooklyn is as big as it is. So I was like, oh, if I just live in Brooklyn, I'm going to be close to my placement regardless of what neighborhood I'm in. That's wrong. Bed-Stuy is a good hour-and-a-half commute from Bay Ridge, which is where my placement is. But it's easy, I think, to manage. What's great about New York City is the access to public transportation. And so it is manageable. You can live anywhere almost in one of the boroughs and still get to your placement, but definitely my advice is sort of to do that research, especially if you're not from like the New York area or not familiar with the different neighborhoods and boroughs. Just be aware, and also public transit is not always on time. So it's important.
So I live in Connecticut, and my first placement was in Connecticut, but for my second placement, the options that I wanted were very limited there. So when I talked to my advisor, we talked about, okay, how much am I willing to travel and, use if I have access to transportation and stuff like that. So for my second year placement, it's in White Plains, which is like about a 40-minute drive from where I live, which is, to me, that's doable. But I didn't realize that I was going with traffic, so I do have to add a little extra time to that in the morning. But again, it's really kind of, there's a I could take the train, I could take the bus, but for me it just works with driving. It just makes it easier. But so I think that just working with your advisor and really like, okay, where are you located and how much do you want to travel out and what options do you have?
I agree as well. Mine's is at my job, so that's the perk of OIR students. But everyone said, like, just really having that open conversation with your advisor on your limitations, because travel makes a difference. MTA is not always going everybody's way, and traffic, New York City traffic is New York City traffic. So just really having that candid conversation and doing your research.
Yeah, I would just basically reinforce everything everyone else said. I think, something my field advisor said was, or while I was getting placed was, are you willing to travel? And are you willing to travel to get a placement that is, maybe more of what you're looking for versus like maybe a placement, are you willing to travel basically for like what you want? And I said yes, which led me to a commute that was a little bit longer. I live in Chelsea in Manhattan, and the hospital I'm working at is in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. It's about a 45-minute commute, not terrible. And I know people whose commutes are 10 minutes versus maybe like up to an hour. But it really all depends sort of like how long are you willing to commute, and working that out with your field advisor.
And I also think one good thing to add about if you commute via public transit is it's an opportunity to maybe like catch up on readings. So I know a lot of people use public transport as like a study space as well.
Totally.
So you can try and like play it to your advantage.
We have a question from Haley. Did any one of you consider other graduate programs? Why did you ultimately land on the MSW?
Yeah, I considered this. I was considering law school, so I was studying for the LSAT before I decided to apply for my MSW. And as I began studying more and more for the LSAT, I felt like it was too sterile, that law wasn't going to be hands-on enough for the changes that I wanted to make on a community and individual level. And also at the same time, my partner's mom is a social worker, and she works for Planned Parenthood, and so I sort of had a conversation about her with what the MSW program looks like, and sort of did a shift on what I was doing. So I said goodbye to law school, and then I applied for my MSW because I thought going in that social workers were like what you see on TV, where they take children away from their families, and that's not true at all. And so once I learned more about what you can do with an MSW degree, I was like, wow, this is way better than law school. So.
For me, when I graduated from undergrad, I was working in a preventive program, and I think at that point I had fallen a little bit out of love with social work and with the career. Like I was just in a different season of life then, and I was considering a total career change into graphic design. But before making that decision, I accepted this other position that was a little more clinical and kind of gave me a different perspective of what I can do with the social work, and allowed me to really explore that area. And when I decided to continue my education, I went back and forth between counseling and social work, but ultimately decided in social work because I think it's such an open space to really do a lot of different things. You are not just committed to doing clinical work. You can do administrative work. You can do micro work. So it just really gave me an opportunity to really adapt it to where I am in my life at different points. So
I second that. I think my first career as an undergrad was definitely being Olivia Benson on Law and Order, and that was solid. I have a psych degree from my undergrad, so it was definitely moving into the clinical and getting a PhD in. And I had a really good professor, having done forensics, having done just like wanting to work with juvenile justice, and saying like, after working in these difficult populations, like what are you going to do? And I couldn't really answer. And he said, you're already doing social work. You've already had preventative work. You've already done residential. Like, why give yourself a limit when you can have options, and here I am.
Yeah, I got a bachelor's, education in art. I didn't even know if I was thinking of grad school, but then fast forward 3 years after I graduated from undergrad, social work just kind of like fell into place. I know I wasn't really thinking of doing like the mental health counselor route, which is the other degree that people often, equate with like an MSW. I know people do choose between one or the other, but I do think the MSW gives you a lot, as everyone has said, expands to more meso and macro fields rather than just the clinical, like micro social work. So, yeah.
A few of you mentioned study abroad programs. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences there as a social work student?
So I enjoyed my study abroad program. I live and breathe study abroad anytime I have an opportunity. I studied in January of last year. I did Israel, and I studied a course which it was working with children whose families suffer from substance abuse. Amazing course, just the community around understanding different cultures and the openness you have to have the ability to learn a different perspective. It allowed me to work with different people in a different setting outside of just my traditional OYR students trajectory. Just culture, food, the coursework was heavy. It is no joke in a study abroad program, but the way you come out at the end is just amazing what you learn. I did also study abroad in Washington, D.C. As somebody who did not see himself in policy, D.C. changed my life. It showed me that social workers need to be on a platform when it comes to politics. It showed the ways that even if you don't want to be on the front line doing it, you can do macro work in your agencies in the field that you love for the populations you care about. And it just allowed me to kind of reinforce why NYU was a great choice, because I was able to touch upon different momentums between macro, meso, and micro work.
I did the 2-week program over this past summer in Paris, and it was the multicultural approach to children and family social work. So we did learn a lot about, family therapy, which was really great, something I knew nothing about, and that's one reason I chose to take the study abroad course. Something totally different than what I was, about to do in my second year placement. And something that I really loved about the course was that, you were learning about, a field in a completely different, a completely different place of the world. And, I knew a little bit about, the child protective system, in the US, but you're learning about the how child protection works in France and in Europe, and getting to compare those two things and seeing how, policy affects, that system in one place versus the US, and sort of how the social work profession is viewed in different places of the world. And that was something that was very eye-opening, and that I definitely took back, to the US, and that I think about often, like while I'm even in class now. So, yeah.
So I did my whole first year in China, so it's a little bit of a different study abroad experience. It's much more general than sort of the 2-week or over the summer study abroad experience that you would have as a student who came to New York first. I like to say for my Shanghai program, I spent sort of a year not totally understanding like everything that was happening around me, but being very grateful that I did it and learning a lot about myself and social work and cultural values as a whole. So what I loved so much about China is that we got to work with Chinese national students, so they were in our program with us, and we're all sort of going through this journey together, and there's 14 of us. So it's a really intimate space to share different cultural ideas, different ways of learning, different ways of viewing different populations. And so it was amazing to get to see sort of this Asian Chinese perspective on aging versus like the American or Western perspective, and really have an opportunity to have discussions about different topics that you wouldn't otherwise necessarily get to have anywhere else other than in a classroom that's literally multicultural.
I didn't study abroad, so.
Yasmin wants to know if anyone is focusing on clinical classes in their second year and what classes they're taking.
I think like part of our curriculum is having clinical classes. Like they're already, like they're the mandatory classes. But I think some of like the, what are they called? The electives. There's so many different ones, and if you are more clinical or want to see what more clinical classes look like, you have an opportunity to do it through that.
Yeah.
So
I would say our classes are like clinical focused unless you choose to do macro. So in terms of like our practice classes, you can choose to take a macro practice or do the macro focused learning opportunity, macro focused learning opportunity. Otherwise, you are just sort of in this clinical track, but like Wendy said, in terms of electives, you have a really wide range of opportunities. Like you can take one specific to different therapeutic modalities and other things. So I'm not in any of those, but those are options.
Yeah, I would actually say now that I'm thinking about it, I am sort of clinically focusing my second year. Since I do work in a hospital with in an inpatient psych unit, and something I can see myself definitely continuing to do after I graduate. Some of the classes I've chosen to take are like psychopharmacology, where you learn about different medications. I'm currently taking a DBT class, which is a form of psychotherapy for specific patients with like personality disorders. I took Intro to Clinical Diagnosis, so that's a very clinically focused class. But and those are all, like those three classes I just mentioned are electives, and so if you like really want to clinically focus your education, those electives are there for you. There's a ton of different electives, and those are some great ones that I currently am taking.
Yeah, I agree. I think NYU's curriculum foundation is clinical, but I think if you want to be a little bit more specific and kind of tailor your learning, there are classes. I took CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and I enjoyed it. And I think as you go through your journey, through your learning process, and through your track, you'll figure out where you stand or what appeals to you, and then you can kind of create your own track in that aspect of it.
We have a question from Nicole. What kind of research experience have you gained during your time here?
So you have to take 2 research classes while you're here, but I think they vary pretty differently. The first one is much more of what you think of research in terms of like gathering data and that sort of stuff, and then the second one is much more program design oriented. I'm in it right now, so I'm not 100% sure, but that's what it seemed like to me. And I'm also actually, for one of my electives, doing independent research with a professor here, Dr. Tassone, and we're working on trauma. Specifically, we're doing research on creating a modality to work with communities that have collectively survived sexual assault. And so you do have a lot of opportunities to do research if you want to, and so the research that I'm doing with Dr. Tassone is much more, I'm going to forget the correct research word, but focused on like what people have to say as opposed to data and numbers. Qualitative, there we go. It's much more qualitative than quantitative. But there are plenty of opportunities if that's sort of the part of social work that you're interested in.
I think like you said, like we do have to take 2 classes, and they are tailored differently to just show us different aspects of what research is. But I think our classes in general, you can implement research into it because you have to write all these papers and you have to inform yourself, and you have to like a lot of the papers you're going to write for practice are revolving around your field placement and how you learned what is it in the community that it serves. So you have to do research on the programs that your practice has and see if they are working or if the way that they're implemented are the way that they were designed to work. So I think research is really in the core of the program in a way.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. But also, if research is your forte, then make it a focus one and go and try to connect with professors, people who are already doing the work, maybe a particular spot or a particular section of the agency that is focused on research, and you can definitely have that conversation if that's more of what you're looking for.
Yeah, I was also going to say, even if you're more sort of focused in psychotherapy, like all of those modalities are, have been proven by research studies, and like you'll learn all about that, but it really is, it pops up everywhere in the curriculum, and it really opens your eyes to like how important research is in the field of social work. So that's something you'll definitely get regardless of what your research background and interest is in.
We have a question from Julia. Have you experienced collaboration or learning with other students in your program? Are you often around other MSW students?
Yes. So in my campus, the Westchester Campus, you're gonna be, if you do the 2-year program, you're gonna be with the same students like all 4 semesters, and you become really close and you form relationships. And because they come from different areas of New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, you really get to bond with them and their field experiences, and you really provide support for one another. I know like some of my closest friends right now have field placements in Connecticut that maybe are agencies that I had previously had collaborated with in my own work that I can like talk to them about and collaborate with them and kind of just provide some type of support. And then when I come to NYU, once in a while, I am around the social work school, so yeah.
I'd say even though I'm only in Manhattan or on NYU's campus when I have class, I'm still surrounded by MSW students in my field placement from different colleges, which is also really unique and I think fun because we get to see sort of how their learning might be different than ours or what they bring from their education that's maybe a little different than NYU's. And so that sort of collaboration is really unique, I think, to an MSW program and your internship. So I enjoy that aspect of it as well. And like to echo the sentiment, a lot of my close friends are also in the MSW program. It just happens when you're going through like the kind of emotional labor of a MSW program, you like form bonds really quickly with other people.
Yeah, definitely to that point. Before starting the program, I did not know any other people with a social work degree or interested in an MSW, but, through that first year of class, you end up finding a really great support system, and that's something I can definitely attribute to, NYU Silver and its community. Definitely you need, those other people who can understand what you're going through in terms of, your field placement and some of, the things that you're learning about and shared interests and passions. And so I enjoy being also surrounded by, like you said, students at my current field placement. There are other interns, and that's really helpful as a support system in that sort of like professional side of things.
I would say this program gets tough. Definitely when you come to NYU or just in a program, introduce yourself, get to know somebody, get a number, a friend. Like, they will be your biggest support throughout this process. My friends are also social workers, and as much as we love each other, we go through this process together, and it can be tough, but that additional support to have somebody that understands the process is very important. And then look for other supports outside of your school. Give yourself that breath, because social work is a lot. To be around social workers all the time, but interact into different spaces, go look around the university, and I think having those different support systems, even in Silver, but also outside of Silver, is a great aspect for me.
I'm so glad you said that, because I also wanted to say, like, you have friends outside the social work program too, because it is emotionally exhausting, and to only be surrounded by social workers, sometimes you get into this like cyclical cycle of talking about things that can get really emotional and heavy. So having support systems that lie outside of MSW students, program, teachers, faculty, that sort of thing, can be like a nice breath of fresh air for sure.
Switching gears a little bit into the logistics, Marisol wants to know any tips or recommendations on where to start looking for housing in New York, especially if you're an out-of-towner.
Marisol. It is a journey. The typical, like Facebook, sometimes people sell like a room. There's a website, Gypsy Housing, is that what it's called? Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
So I'm native to New York City. Housing can be quite difficult, but I think definitely doing the research beforehand. Facebook groups are really good. Sometimes just asking a friend, getting to campus and just like using the different resources. I don't know much apps because it's a little different being somebody who's native, but having talked to a couple of people, it's just really in their classes, just asking questions. And also not just narrowing yourself to Silver, but either graduate programs and just asking different people.
Yeah, so I am not from New York, I'm from South Carolina, and coming from Shanghai, there's like a little bit of a scramble to finding housing. So my advice too is join any program should have like a Facebook group of the current and former students. NYU Silver does. That's a really great place to start. And because we are social workers, we are really good at giving other people resources. And so if you like post in a Facebook group that's specific to whatever program you end up in, and be like, hey, I'm from out of town, I need housing. Can anyone like explain the nuances to me or help me? Like 8 people will jump in and are willing to help you. So it's not as daunting as it may seem. But definitely start looking a little early, especially within New York City. Like you want to start looking, like I would say 5 to 3 months before you want to find housing, because that's when everyone else is starting to figure out what they're doing with their current housing. It's also time for me to go to class, so thank you.
So, on the note of classes, what has been your favorite class so far?
Before I go, I really just want to say
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Sorry, my favorite class that I've taken is an elective called Grief, Loss, and Bereavement. And by that title, it wouldn't sound like anyone's favorite class. But I took it with Darren Arthur. Shout out to Darren if you're watching. Like he made that class like not heavy, and he made learning about like palliative and end of life care something really profound. And he said to us, loss is the only thing or only guaranteed connection you'll ever have with a client. Like we all experience loss, and he made it something that I had never thought about going into palliative care or end of life care, but he made it seem like something that was a possibility and attainable and much less heavy than it may first seem. So thank you.
My favorite class thus far, and maybe this will change this semester, but was my Practice 1 class, which is the foundation class you take your first semester as a 2-year student. That will be it'll last your entire year, the same professor will teach both Practice 1 and 2, and you'll take that, throughout the entire year. So I guess Practice 1 and 2 were my favorite classes, but that was due to my professor. She really, and I think it was also due to the fact that I really did not have social work experience before entering the program. So she literally set the foundation for my professional career that I will have after the program. She was a clinician herself, and she often gave a lot of case examples. It was my first time really hearing what a clinician does and how she approaches clients, and she was she is a psychotherapist, and so she really created that awesome classroom environment. She shared a lot of personal things with us about her practice, which allowed us to feel really, really comfortable and ask her questions. And I will really never forget that class. There was 15 of us, and it was wonderful. And we all still say hi to each other when we see each other throughout the building. So yeah, I just really loved practice.
For me, hands down has to be DROP, which is Diversity, Race, Oppression, and Privilege. That class is foundational to social work. If you want to be a social worker, know the idea of that is built on oppression and marginalized communities, and being able to understand how you show up in a room with your own identities and how that might resonate with somebody, whether it's your colleague, your client, your supervisor, and how do you navigate those things, and really understanding that you have to do the work yourself individually in order to help other clients and families and just agencies, and just being in a room where you're talking about these heavy topics that are usually not talked about in certain spaces, and being able to really address these issues to better yourself as a social worker, but also to be a better social worker to the idea of social work, the field of social work, and to your communities.
For me, my favorite class was a 1-credit elective forensic social work. Advice, take advantage of the 1-credit electives because you can just get so much out of those. But that class for me was just so unique in the way of setting a safe space to have very hard conversations. You sit in a room with people that have different backgrounds, different experiences, and I think it went along with the DROP class of knowing where you stand and where's your space and how you identify, and how forensic social work, which talks about a lot about policy and incarceration and just a lot of different levels that as social workers we're trying to advocate and make changes in, which is very interesting for me, and to have that safe space to have those tough conversations that not only started in the classroom, but that allowed me to know how to have them outside of the classroom with peers, my friends, in my placement, in other environments. I think that's why that was my favorite class.
Let's talk a little bit about the community at Silver. Are you part of any student groups? What's the culture or the classroom environment like here?
Ooh, I have 10,000 positions. I am part of SLC, which is a Student Leadership Council, which I think is vital to understanding and giving back your experience to new incoming Silver students. I love that opportunity to be able to share resources, exchange information, and help navigate new students through a Silver experience. Being a grad welcome leader on a university level, that allows me to be able to network with all 17 graduate schools, I think that's 17, and see them in different light and make those connections and really make my NYU experience even larger than just Silver School. And then on top of that, just doing other things within my community as a person of color, being a part of social work in that aspect, advocating for being a graduate advisor for Wasserman, the importance of career development, and being able to advocate for the needs of social workers and jobs and experiences in the Wasserman Center. So I think being connected is very important, and whatever track you're doing, it's hard, but make that time to just be connected outside of your classroom, but in other spaces that can just really develop you as a person. And I think each of my positions have definitely enhanced my skills in ways, and also shed light to skills I never knew I had.
So I'm unfortunately not involved in any groups in NYU here in Washington Square or in the Westchester campus, but I think as a whole in my classes, like I said, like I've been with the same students all 4 semesters, and we kind of create our own group like that and our own support system. And like you guys said before, it's like people that are going through the same program as you are, they'll understand the struggles of going through that program, and creating a support group in that way. And I think for me, realistically, it wasn't possible to be part of any groups even if I wanted to. So that's kind of where I am.
I'm not really involved in any of the student groups, unfortunately, but I guess something I am involved is like kind of like this program, like a Silver champion, which they call it, like, which is like an admissions ambassador. I really like that opportunity because I've gotten to connect, via email, phone with prospective students to share my experience, and I really like doing that. And then maybe something else that I was thinking of is that you will start to get a lot of emails from NYU, and don't be overwhelmed. But sometimes I do read those emails, and they have really great resources in them. And something I've really enjoyed going to are a speaker series that Silver started to do, bringing in different professionals, whether it's like a professor or someone from a global administrative office or something, to come and speak with students. And it's just sort of, you can attend. You don't have to sign up or anything. They'll just give you, it's sort of like an event, and you can go and hear them speak. And that's been a cool opportunity to connect with different students who I've never met before who are in the program, and hear from, faculty members. So that's been cool.
We have time for one more question, and it is, what is one piece of advice you have for prospective students?
I think my piece of advice would be to be realistic with yourself. I think that coming into a master's program, there's expectations for you. As a student, there's expectations. Being at your field placement, there's expectations for you as well. You are an intern, you are a student, you're learning, but there's certain expectations that you have to meet. And I think if you're working as well, you have that responsibility and the expectations you have to meet there. And I think for yourself even, and I'm speaking for myself, I know that I have very high expectations of what I want to do and what I can accomplish, but I think being realistic, and I think we mentioned self-care and not saying yes, and it's okay to say no sometimes, and that's not gonna, make it like anything or anybody that they don't like you. But I think just being realistic with yourself and really making the program fit to you and not you fit to the program.
I would say that it's a journey. You are going to see so many different versions of yourself. Trust the process. Are you going to hear it in class, definitely trust the process, get involved. And I don't really mean, it doesn't have to be in a student group, it doesn't really have to be on a leadership perspective, but it can just be being an active participant in your class, being an active participant in the communities, in your jobs, advocate for yourself, get to know your professors. They have a lot of knowledge. Ask questions. Just really be active in your education because you are paying for it, and utilize any resources that NYU has. The library, the Career Center, Silver CBD, the list goes on, going to events for graduate students, and just even some of the events that are for NYU undergrads, like being part of a graduate welcome leader. A lot of times graduate students feel like they don't have those access to those services. You are more than welcome. You pay for the tuition, utilize it, and you'll be surprised what more resources you can obtain.
Definitely. And I think I sort of alluded to this before with one of my answers, but, to really be open-minded. I think it's easy to go into like a specific graduate program with like very specific sort of standards, like you said, for yourself and ideas of like where you could be when you graduate. But I really do think, especially with the MSW program, that you're going to be exposed to a lot of different topics and ways of thinking that you might not have experienced before, different populations. And I really do think that you need to absorb that information, really take that in, and be open-minded, because it could shift your interests, and that's okay. And allow yourself to, really let go and tap into what, where you're drawn to.
And with that, I'd like to thank our panelists for their insight and candid answers. And for everyone who joined us tonight, thanks so much for your questions. I know our admissions office is here for you, and I know everyone at Silver is also looking forward to welcoming our next class of MSW students. So thanks, everyone.
Good luck.
Bye.
Bye.